talk about the deep state, we talk about the globalists.
Inflation versus deflation.
Well, I mean,
Here at Mar-a-Lago.
I'm baffled that this isn't front page news.
Do you guys support a specific political party, or do you dislike both of them?
Oh, it worked like a charm on you guys.
Let's go, Brandon.
What is up, everybody? Glad to be back. Happy Monday. I'm here with a very special guest. This guest's name is Hans Manske. So Hans is a legal scholar, geopolitical expert, author of a book called Swiftboarding America, and we have a lot of geopolitical and legal things to get into today. So Hans, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Very good, very good. So I was listening to your last podcast about the federal funding freeze and the USAID and everything, and I think a really overlooked thing is that what you were hitting on perfectly, I thought, was that they're targeting the NGOs in large part with this federal funding freeze. And I think a lot of people are overlooking that, and the media is trying to cast the narrative that they're going after Social Security and anything like that. So, can you expand on that? And you did a great job isolating the point of how NGOs basically act as unofficial government officials, like the way that the reason they'll have like contractors go overseas and fight wars for us, like in addition to our actual soldiers, is because they could do things that the government cannot do. So, would you say that's accurate?
That is exactly accurate. So you have these NGOs, they're basically off the book contractor. Well, they're on the book contractors, but they're kind of off the book government. And that's the problem. So they call themselves NGO, non-governmental organizations. But let's face it, if there's government funding, the government direction, government coordination, you can use any noun you want. If there's any link whatsoever, well, then it's not NGO because, well, it's GO, right? It's not
right.
None. So that's the truth of it. And all of these NGOs are all government funded. That's another truth about it. And if what are non-NGOs? Well, I guess there might be some private groups. They exist and they're free to do whatever they want. But we're talking about government-funded organizations. And again, that's a mislabel. I don't even know of any NGO that is actually an NGO. I think they're all GOs. But
Absolutely.
If they're tied to government, if government funds them, if government is instructing them or coordinating with them or any number of things. We've got one example here where a guy in USAID, he helped establish an NGO and he helped fund it lavishly. And then he quit USAID and then he became the CEO of that NGO. I mean, you couldn't find anything that's sort of, and by the way, that had to do with the Wuhan lab. I mean, that's a story sort of all upon itself, but
really,
that's the essence of the problem. And for all the media and the Democrats and whatever to be so upset now that their, cherished NGOs aren't being funded anymore. Well, sorry. This is government, and the government decides what it wants to fund or what it doesn't want to fund. If you are the elected president, then you get to decide these things. That's how the executive works. So, this is horrible. The sort of the pushback, and there's no basis for it. But of course, they'll try, and they've already found courts. They found courts in Rhode Island, and usually it's somewhere in Hawaii. They found one in Rhode Island. They found one up in Seattle. So they're doing their thing to try and slow this down. But ultimately, I don't think they can, because
really,
President Trump decides if he wants to fund these things or not, unless if Congress specifically said this much money goes to this group for this purpose, which it rarely does. I mean, usually it's these sort of broader things. And then, well, at that point, the executive decides. So unless it's one of those deals where it's very, very, the law is really, really specific, I don't think they're going to get away with it.
Oh, good. So what, they're going to end up appealing it, you think?
Oh, for sure. This is going to go on for a while, but I don't think they're going to win in the end. And certainly, as these cases go up into the Supreme Court, I don't see they're going to win. But we're really looking at a 4-year kind of process here of just exposing all the corruption, exposing everything that went on. The podcast you mentioned, that was a few days ago. That was even before we got into the sort of the whole USAID and so on. I mean, we were talking about it, but it wasn't as focused as it is, say, today, where it's really about that. And Elon Musk, of course, did his own podcast on it where he just described how completely corrupt that whole thing is.
Well, it sounds like large scale money laundering for the most part. Like it sounds like there's just this big pile of money and they find these, technically legal ways to move it around. And that's what all this is being sorted out right now.
Well, I mean, we can put some flesh on the bones of what I mentioned earlier. So there was a high-ranking, and this is all, you can look it all up and so on. This is all, and I've also got it on my X account and so on. We're talking about this. There was a high-ranking official within USAID. So they're doing humanitarian aid and, this kind of stuff that the media and the Democrats will tell you. Well, his name is Dennis Carroll. So what did he do? He set up something that was called the Global Virome Project. And it's just one of those grifts where, they go virus hunting or pandemic prevention. That's just a giant grift. There's no way you can prevent a natural pandemic because there are millions and billions of viruses out there and they can mutate in millions and billions of ways. And there's just simply no way of predicting what's going to happen. The whole thing was a grift from the start. And in fact, when you look at some of the stuff that was written about this before COVID, people were saying that the whole thing is a grift. So anyway, this guy helped set up this grift called Global Virome Project. It was lavishly funded by USAID while this Dennis Carroll guy was there. This was together with a guy called Peter Daszak, which I'm sure your viewers have heard about. Anyway, and as soon as the thing was set up and lavishly funded, Dennis Carroll leaves USAID and suddenly becomes the CEO of this Global Virome Project. I mean, it couldn't be more clear in terms of the grift that's going on there. You got all this money going into Ukraine, hundreds of billions. Yep. And suddenly we got Zelensky saying, well, he doesn't know where the money is. So
what? I would love to see it like a flow chart of not only that money, but the money for COVID, of like where exactly that money went on its journey, like where it started, where it went, how it was spent, who ended up with it. Because I mean, I'm sure we'd all be blown away if we saw the true path and the true route of that money. Like, do you have any imagination or any, I guess, evidence of where that money ended up, or like how the majority of it was spent?
Well, ever since the Ukraine war, the 2022 war, it's been really, the whole thing is really shrouded in mystery. They just put a big lid on it. But we do know from before, and there's some absolutely incredible stories. I mean, incredible as in incredibly bad. So for instance, USAID, the same group we're talking about here, they were in cahoots with a company called Burisma.
Yep, of course.
Burisma, of course, is the corrupt energy company that was paying Hunter Biden. What's USAID doing with Burisma in Ukraine? There was a project to do with pipelines, and then there was another project to do with they were staging events together, and so on and so forth. Sounds very, very murky to me. And so we know these things happen because we found some emails where USAID is discussing their cooperation with Burisma. I mean, incredible, isn't it?
Oh, it is. So what's up with the explosion in NGOs like over the last 70 years or so? Because here, I'll share this chart here quick. I mean, it's just went crazy since the end of World War II. And I asked that kind of rhetorically because I know like everything got out of control after World War II. Like we had to find ways to spend money and whatnot. But like, you see this chart here and it just gets out of control. Like, I mean, after World War II, but then it really gets out of control in the 90s. I mean, and then I really think these things control the world to a degree, because I know that like places like the WEF or the UN, they kind of get their marching orders from NGOs, and then NGOs get their marching orders from anonymous donors who are normally the richest people in the world. So it's like a kind of like they're pretty high up there in the pecking order in terms of how things get decided.
I mean, I think a number of things come together. I mean, on the one hand, I don't want to lose sight of this. There's a lot of people saying these NGOs are cover groups for the CIA. And in many cases, that is true. Or they're saying these NGOs are pushing government policy off the books. And again, that is true in many cases. So for instance, when you look at the migrant caravans, I mean, this is something that's been bugging me long before, it became a big kind of topic in the news, that people don't just get up one morning and walk 3,000 miles to the US border. That just doesn't happen. There are organizations behind that. There's a whole system behind it. And guess who funds that system? Well, USAID, State Department, and so on. They fund these NGOs, and then these NGOs go out there and help these people. They have these way stations along the way. They feed them, they bus them, they do all these things and, help them. Now, obviously, if they did that directly, if the State Department directly just sent their people there and helped these migrant caravans, people might ask questions and then that might not be so good. So they kind of outsource that. So that's part of it too. But the part that I think is sort of sometimes lost among, CIA and off the books government and whatever is the grift. And that's what draws in so many people. It is just a giant grift. Now, between those three, I don't necessarily I don't know how to apportion what percentage of this or what percentage of that. But the grift is certainly a huge part of it. Just pure grift is not about.
What do you mean when you say grift in relation to this?
Well, like what we just discussed with the Global Virome Project. These are just people who just want to make a whole bunch of money. They're not necessarily leftist or woke people. It's not about ideology. It's not about government pushing some program. It's not about government pushing coups in other countries and so on. All those things happen as well under that label. But I just think sometimes what gets lost is that there are a lot of people involved in these NGOs, both just the NGOs, just private people who just rake in the money. I mean, you should look at some of these salaries they pay themselves. That guy we mentioned earlier, Peter Daszak, he was paying himself like $500,000 for a supposed NGO. Exactly. So a lot of it is just simple. It's not politics. It's not, trying to have rainbow revolutions in other countries, whatever. It is that too. They're used for these purposes as well. For instance, in Ukraine and back in 2014, that's another big one, talking about USAID, which I think here in the next few days will be talked about more, the role they played in that. But again, I think all of those things are true and all of those things are happening, but it's also just about grift, just pure kind of human greed. And so many people, you're asking, why are there so many? Well, because it became a giant gravy train. And it didn't really matter what your politics were or whatever, as long as you jumped on that gravy train and just took the money. And then, of course, in order to get the money, you would have to write nice little mission statements. We're here to save the planet, save the children, climate change, whatever. You put those kinds of key words there, and then, the money would flow.
Yeah, and I would even go a step further than the 2014 Ukraine thing. I think Syria, that was in large part, even the Arab Spring revolutions, that was all driven by NGOs. NGOs were literally there training people in the Middle East how to use social media to start uprisings, training them on how to protest, training them on what to say. And they're recording each other doing it. It's almost like a movie set or something they're creating there. And then same thing with when Putin had that brief time when he wasn't president, the NGOs were starting protests and paying people to protest in Russia, saying that they wanted to overthrow the government. And then Putin made the NGOs that are in Russia declare themselves as foreign entities in order to conduct things as NGOs. Because every country that there is a kind of revolution situation and ends up tracing back to an NGO. So, I mean, it really is stuff that's acting on behalf of the CIA a lot of the time. And so when you say grift, are you saying that they see which direction the government wants things to go and then just kind of place themselves there, as if the government wants to push green energy and solar panels and electric cars, certain people place themselves in position to build those things and profit off of that?
Exactly. I think, again, when you just look at the people involved with these things, you have a combination of things. So you do have true believers. They do exist. You do have the purple-haired 20-year-old who just is completely messed up in the head and they just truly believe, the world is going to end if I don't do this right now. And then they jump on. And in fact, this is very important as a cover, because if you have these kinds of people, well, those are the ones you can hold out to the public. Look, we're legit. We got these people, these true believers. Okay, so that's a big part of it. Another big part of it is, of course, the sort of the undercover work, the IC work, all that kind of stuff. The people who control the directions because of political outcomes or rainbow revolutions, whatever it is. And then thirdly, I think you have the grifters. They'll just go with wherever the wind blows from, and they'll just say whatever they need to say to cash in.
Right. So to transition slightly, one of the most shocking things I saw in the last few days was that Elon Musk tweets out that DOGE discovered that, among other things, that payment approval officers at the Treasury were instructed to always approve payments, even if they were known to be fraudulent or to go to terrorist groups. So he's saying they literally never denied a payment their entire career, not even once. Have you looked into this at all? You know anything about this?
Well, I've seen what you've seen. We
Yeah.
now have a group of staff within the Treasury who are trying to get a court to get Elon out of their system. The filings look pretty threadbare to me. But again, as we learned during Trump's first term, that doesn't matter as long as you find the right judge, and then the judge will put a restraining order on the whole thing, and then they'll put a stop to it, at least for a while. So they will try and sabotage it. I don't think they will altogether, the people who are suing, but they will at least kind of hobble it. They'll stop it for a while. It is mind-boggling, and I'm sure it's true. Elon wouldn't have said it if it wasn't true, that everything just gets signed off. It's like some kind of a tacit understanding. We'll just sign off on everything. You leave us alone. We leave you alone, and everyone just skims the system. It's absolutely shocking. I think what we're going to find out here in the next few, as I said earlier, I think this is a 4-year thing. This isn't going to blow over in the next few weeks or months or whatever. This will go on, and we will find so much corruption, so much waste, so much fraud. It will just totally blow our minds. When we saw what happened when Elon bought Twitter, and it was a similar experience, but on a much smaller kind of level. It was pretty mind-blowing at the time because it exposed government corruption, and it exposed the censorship regime, and it exposed that the government had backdoors into Twitter where they could flag tweets and get people removed and all this horrible stuff. Well, Elon uncovered all of that as soon as he bought Twitter, and now he's doing it again, but he's doing it on a whole different level. He's doing it on the federal government level. And I think we've just kind of scratched the surface here. This is like not even a tip of the iceberg. This is just the tip of the tip. There's going to be so much more.
Right. So you say they might try to block this. So if they block this, it goes to a federal judge. Then if they appeal it, it would naturally end up going up to the Supreme Court if it had
Correct.
to.
That's right.
How long would that take to play out?
Well, that sort of depends a bit on the Supreme Court. They can accelerate that. I hope they will. But we're looking at months anyway. Whatever's going to happen. I mean, if it's a really urgent issue because someone claims their lives have been upended and they're not getting any money and whatever, that can be accelerated. But you got there's one judge now has a temporary restraining order on on Elon Musk going in there. So that's then going to go to appeal, and then that's going to take, you're going to have filings. I mean, that's going to take at least a few weeks, probably more. So this is all going to take a while. The important thing is to move fast. While this is going on, Elon and President Trump just need to do other things. They need to blow up other things so that you keep having the other side kind of scramble and always on their back foot, always like, oh, we need to sue here, we need to sue here, but always make sure that you're a bit ahead. And by the time you've destroyed 3 or 4 other things, then you can go back to the initial temporary restraining order, and you can try and win your case there. Again, with this, the forum shopping is absolutely ridiculous. The forum shopping means where these litigants, these phony litigants, they literally choose, as mentioned, Rhode Island, Hawaii, or whatever, some place where they know they're going to get a good judge, and then they just go there, even though there's no real ties to that place. But that's how this works. And so eventually, unfortunately, you're probably going to have to wait until it goes to the Supreme Court to kind of get finality and to be able to move forward. I think in the long run, we're going to find that the Supreme Court is going to rule in favor of President Trump's administration on all or most of these things. And what that will do is it will really kind of entrench this idea of executive power instead of the fourth column, where you have the bureaucratic power, the bureaucrats run everything. I think we will see a huge realignment, not just for the next 4 years, but basically, for the next generation or so, where the Supreme Court will say, look, our Constitution has 3 pillars, 3 powers, not 4. And the bureaucrats who kind of created their own power over the past, 50, 60 years, they need to give that back because they're under the executive. That's their area, and that's run by the president. So, but it is I mean, you probably find the same when you read these newspaper articles where they say there's a coup going on. I mean, I was reading today, there was a bunch of them that said there was a coup, or President Trump's people weren't allowed to go into the Treasury or not allowed to go there. I'm like, excuse me,
Insane.
this is the guy who runs it. This is the elected guy. By the way, according to the Constitution, he's the only one in whom the executive power is vested. The Constitution doesn't talk about other people. So all that power, executive power, flows from the president. There's nothing else. So the president delegates and says, okay, well, I'll delegate it to this secretary. And then the secretary delegates it to that person, and then so on and so forth. But that's the source of the power. So the bureaucracy does not have its independent source of power where somewhere in the Constitution it says, these bureaucrats, they have this constitutional power to decide all these things. They don't.
Right. No, I totally agree. I mean, if we let this vicious monster kind of build up in the background over the last 40 years or so, and then he's got to wipe that out before he could really be productive, and then I guess clear the thing out for the next person. Did you see that he is putting he's banning gender changing surgeries, but Letitia James is threatening hospitals to continue to do those, the New York Attorney General?
There's going to be, I saw that, there's going to be so much of that.
So I mean, what grounds does she have to do that? When it comes to state versus federal, can she tell hospitals to, continue doing medical procedures that the president's deeming illegal? I guess that ends up turning into a Roe v. Wade situation eventually, right?
You never know. I mean, that is correct. It might, because Roe v. Wade was not based on any particular law. I mean, they went 14th Amendment, which the judges came down saying, well, that obviously means this about abortion. And well, I can't see that language in there. So you never know. You might find a judge who might say, well, 14th Amendment is somehow applicable here. I mean, unfortunately, with these judges, you never know how it's going to end. The only good thing that we've got going right now in terms of the judges, the whole judiciary, that whole side of things, is that the Supreme Court is not always, but on many of these questions is going to be pretty solid. It's not 6-3. People say it's 6-3. It's not. It's sort of 5-4 at best.
Really?
Well,
Why is that?
John Roberts is the Chief Justice is sort of, I don't know, ever since the Obamacare, where he obviously went the other way, he's been very squishy. He started off pretty good when Bush 2 appointed him. He was pretty solid. I don't know what it was, I spent too much time in DC on the cocktail circuits or whatever. I don't know how it works, but he shifted way over to the left. And that, by the way, that's happened to a bunch of these guys when they came up to the Supreme Court. That suddenly there's another guy called David Souter, absolutely terrible. He was a Bush 1 appointee. Who kind of, as soon as he arrived in DC, he just went way over to the left. So you have Roberts, of course, and then Amy Coney Barrett is pretty squishy.
Wow.
Any of these emotional issues, she always sides with the leftists. So, but I think, and here's my prediction, and I hope I'm going to be right on this. The issue of whether the president is the source of all executive power, whether it flows from him, whether he's the one who delegates it, and hence he gets to decide these things if they're not specifically decided in some other way. What we mentioned earlier, that Congress passed a very specific law about doing something very specific. This is a pretty technical question, and it's rooted in the Constitution. And some of them have written about it in the past. And because it's technical and it's not overly emotional and so on, I think they will side with the idea that the president holds the executive power and that the bureaucrats do not hold it.
Right. And I mean, for God's sake, it's not even just sex changes in general, it's for minors. So she's fighting on behalf of making sure that hospitals can do sex changes for minors. So I think that even squishy conservative judges would probably go with that. But I mean, as it stands right now, how does this play out before it gets all the way up to the Supreme Court? Does she have the right to tell hospitals no, you could, you have to keep doing this, or even say that you're allowed to keep doing this if the president says it's not okay, or is that also up for interpretation?
It's going to be decided by judges, and it's just going to go through the motions. It's just going to go feed its way through the system. But I do agree with you on these kinds of questions. Most of them, even Roberts, will probably, side with the no mutilation side. I think we can be pretty sure about that. I mean, Amy Coney Barrett got very squishy about anything to do with COVID. She was a big kind of lockdown person and all that. So when it comes to those kind of, I guess, emotional issues or, issues where there's this mass psychosis in the public, like, oh my goodness, COVID is so terrible and whatever, she's not reliable, and she's shown that. And even though, obviously you have First Amendment and other rights involved, but no, she was very much with the COVIDians. This one, obviously, the mutilations and so on, the gender stuff, I think she'll be pretty solid. The executive power, I think she'll be solid. And then you have a couple of really, really solid ones. Justice Thomas, Justice Alito, Justice Gorsuch is very solid. And Kavanaugh, I don't know. I think some are disappointed in how solid he is, but, usually okay. So one thing that might mix things up a bit is, I don't want to digress too much here, but you got the possibility of Justice Thomas and Alito retiring at some point in the next 2 years.
Isn't Sotomayor kind of sick too? She's kind of in the last phase of this, but where she was even talking about stepping down to like Kamalageddon or something like that. They
did, and well, we don't know what her condition is and how bad it is and so on, but she will just hold on. I mean, Ruth Bader Ginsburg held on basically. Well, she held on until the day she died, and this will happen again because they don't want Trump to have a shot at replacing their seats. So
right.
I think it's going to be. I think Justice Thomas. He's been there for almost 40 years. I mean, for 35 or so years. He deserves retirement if he wants that. And now's his chance, because who knows what's going to. I mean, after 2026, if for whatever reason the Senate is taken over by Democrats, well, then you can't get these guys passed anymore.
Right.
So if it's going to happen, you got to do it in the next 2 years, because you just don't know what's going to happen after that.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's that's something that's very underspoken about. So I would like to see him do that, actually. So moving on, FBI, it's coming out that they're, I guess, investigating the FBI agents who participated in both the Mar-a-Lago raid and in January 6th investigation. So I guess there's some kind of protest going on here. I'll play this clip quick and then show the article about the protests
happening. It can only be described as the start of a massive, much larger than expected purge at the FBI of FBI agents and officials. Many of them, in one way or another, touched the investigations into Donald Trump. Sources telling NBC News this: the Office of Acting Deputy Attorney General Emil Bobe asked the FBI for a list of Bureau employees involved in January 6 cases, sparking panic inside the Bureau by people who fear retribution by the Trump administration amidst an ongoing purge of FBI leadership. Meanwhile, my colleague, NBC's Ken Delanian, reports that several top FBI executives were told to resign or be fired, and that the purge includes more than 20 heads of FBI field offices, including those in Miami and Washington, D.C.
So, I mean, the FBI definitely was overstepping and acting crazy for a period of time there. I mean, so do you think that I hear overwhelmingly that the consensus there is that they didn't like what was going on. So I don't know, like, how do you process this? And then, like, now you're getting articles that are saying there's a revolt or a protest amongst the agents.
Well, it hasn't materialized yet. So
the
agents who were involved with January 6th and Mar-a-Lago were sent a questionnaire, and it was, had the questions were simply in terms of what was their role and what was their title at the time. And, just to, I think what they're trying to figure out is who kind of was super eager, who are the bad apples, and who was just following orders, and whereby following orders is not great. And who was actually objecting, who's actually saying, no, we can't do this, or we shouldn't do this, or we're overstepping here, or whatever. So there's probably these three categories, and they're just trying to figure out who belongs into which category. I mean, one thing I would say that we learned from Russiagate, and that's why I think they're doing this. Everyone heard about the bad apples, Peter Strzok and Lisa Page and Annie McCabe, those names, everyone knows those names.
Yeah.
But as it turns out, there were many, many, many others. And by the way, I write about them in my book, where they were not, people don't really know those names, like Brian Alton and Stephen Soma and Curtis Heidi and many others, where people didn't know about their names. And this whole, this cliche that you always have about, oh, it's just the people at the top, at the rank and file, everyone else is great. Well, in Russiagate, that turned out not to be true. You had bad apples, throughout the whole system, up and down. So just by removing Comey and removing Strzok and so on, you didn't really fix anything, because the bad apples were still there. And then it turns out that some of these bad apples who were involved with Russiagate, because they were not removed, like this chap I mentioned, Brian Alton, he then interfered in the 2020 election, because he declared that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation, and he shut down the investigation. So that's kind of, as an example, the trouble that these bad apples can cause if you don't get rid of all of them. So I think they learned that lesson from Russiagate. So now they just really want to make sure that it's not just the ones at the top. We really need to remove everyone who in any way acted inappropriately.
Yeah. So when it comes to like people like I don't know, Kash Patel and John Ratcliffe, I don't know. I want to trust them. Don't know where I'm at with trusting them. I'm not gonna lie. I never heard John Ratcliffe's name before hearing him being nominated to lead the CIA. Kash Patel, like, I like what he says, but then I've also heard an argument from certain people saying that it's tough to trust somebody who's not a Christian to run the FBI, because I don't know, like, you aren't really kind of anchored to the same set of beliefs that a lot of people are anchored to. Like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you trust those two people?
Oh, I trust them both on with a 10.
Okay,
I'll give you an example. So Ratcliffe did something extraordinary when he was DNI, and this was late in Trump's first term, and he had nothing to gain. He had everything to lose. All these intelligence people were trying to stop him from doing it. He faced tremendous pressure, and he still did it. And it was massive what he did. And what he did was that he released a document that proved that the FBI and the CIA and Obama knew, before this Russiagate hoax took off, before the investigation started, before it was ever in the newspapers, before any of these things happened, they knew that the whole thing was a Hillary Clinton campaign hoax, because there had been an intercepted communication. This is back in July of 2016. So if you know that, but then you still go and pursue President Trump for it, then you are totally corrupt. Absolutely, totally corrupt. And it's not a matter of being a Keystone Cop or, a misunderstanding or, oh, we have to investigate because whatever. No, you knew the whole thing was a hoax. So Ratcliffe, in my view, he gained huge credibility when he did that, because, again, he didn't have to do that. The previous DNIs did not do it. And he faced a lot of backlash because he did it. And of course, President Trump was then no longer president a couple of months after that. So he wasn't really protected either in any way, and then he had to just kind of, I don't even know what he did for the next 4 years, but he kept being very honest. He came out and told us about what he knew about COVID. I mean, we all knew it came out of a lab, but this is the guy who was DNI at the time. And on many occasions, he came out and just said it when no one else, government or former government, would just say it. So I think he'll be great. And Kash Patel, likewise, he was the guy who ran the initial Russiagate investigation. And he was the guy who kind of broke down the door on this. Again, he didn't have to do that. He had a nice job.
What was his title at the time?
He was working in the Department of Justice. There's no reason for him to go become, he wasn't political or anything. There was no reason for him to join Devin Nunes's team. He was recruited because he was the right guy to do this investigation, but he could have just said, no, I'm happy here in the Department of Justice. I got a nice job. It's all very cushy and nice. And he did that. And he, time and again, he went against the sort of the easy way of doing things. He would go where it hurt. For instance, he was the briefer. He was the one who had to brief Ray on what he found. And Ray obviously didn't like what he was hearing. And Ray tried to shove him off to someone else. And Kash Patel insisted, no, you need to know this. This is your FBI. And you guys did all these horrible things that we found out about. So, I think both of them are going to be fantastic. I don't have any worries about either of those two guys.
What do you think it was that made Ray either flip on Trump or Trump misread Ray? Because Trump appointed Ray when Comey stepped down. So, what do you think happened there?
I think just very poor vetting what happened. There's a book from 10, 15 years ago, which someone pointed out to me at the time before Ray was appointed. And then I read the book. I think it's called The Matrix, something Matrix. And what the book is about it's about the Bush 43, so George W. Bush, his presidency. And that during his presidency, that's where we saw the rise of Mueller, Comey, and this is the important part, Ray. So at some point, Mueller and Comey in the book go against President Bush 2. And Ray is totally with them. He is totally on board with them. He's he'll step through fire for them, whatever. I mean, it's all detailed in there. But once you read that, and this is again going way back, I think the book is from about 2010 or so, and then it describes the events of like 2003, 4, 5, a war on terror, extraditions, waterboarding, a lot of these kinds of things going on. Anyway, there was one incident where Comey tried to, I think it was the Attorney General was in hospital for some reason, Alberto Gonzalez, I think it was at the time. And I mean, don't quote me, it's all in the book, but Comey, being that sneaky weasel that he is, or that snake, he tried to use that opportunity to usurp, his line of command and authority. And anyway, long story short, Ray was with Comey. They were tied together. And so you read that and you go like, what is President Trump doing appointing this guy? This is horrendous. You can't trust this guy. Did he change over the past 5 or 10 years? I don't know, but you don't want to take that risk. Of course, he was a Chris Christie recommendation, that didn't work out with any of them. So I think it was just poorly managed. That's all it is. And do I blame President Trump? No, not really. I mean, look at everything that was thrown at him. They had his national security advisor removed immediately on a complete lie and a made-up hoax. Then they pushed the same hoax to get rid of Jeff Sessions, at least to recuse. Then they used that to get Mueller. And so the Ray appointment, of course, happened right after the Mueller thing started. There was every day, all the media talked about was Russia collusion, and Trump is a Russian agent, and the doors are closing in, or the walls are closing in, on and on. But you remember, we all remember what it was like. So it was definitely a misstep. I don't think Ray changed or whatever. It was just a poor choice.
So speaking of DNI and John Ratcliffe before, I heard last week that Tulsi's vote for DNI might be held in secrecy. Have you heard anything about that, or do you think that could actually happen?
No, it won't happen. It will just be a normal vote, and she'll get in.
You think so?
Yeah, she'll get in.
Out of the three, they're saying out of Tulsi, RFK, and Cash. I think the Vegas odds are lowest on Tulsi for some reason.
No, she'll get in. I think they'll try and spring some surprise on Cash. At least that's what. Reading between the lines last week during his hearing, that's sort of where it was heading, because they kept talking about he should release some grand jury transcript, and then they should release the Jack Smith report, and supposedly that talks about Cash, even though no one is supposed to have seen the report, the second part. So it's almost as if Jack Smith kind of gave Democrats a heads up. So I don't know. I hope it doesn't happen, but it might happen that they're going to spring some kind of trap. Remember with Brett Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court, that was last minute. Everything was smooth. They were going to have a vote. And then literally sort of just before midnight of the day when they were going to have a vote, they were like, nope, now we're going to spring this Christine Blasey Ford story. So last week, it looked a bit like they were going to do something on that of that nature. I hope not. We'll see. Tulsi, I think, definitely will come in, will get in, and Robert Kennedy. I mean, this is so horrendous. The fact that this is even an issue as to whether he should get in. I mean, everyone always talks about bipartisan and coalitions and big tent and whatever. You couldn't have a bigger big tent appointee than Robert Kennedy. He supports abortion. He's an environmental lawyer. He is all these kinds of things that you do not associate with Republicans. So the fact that he's going to be in a Republican administration, Democrats should be super happy.
Oh yeah, 100%. But I mean, they don't care about any of that stuff. Like that's all just talking points. So I want to show you something, and I want to know if you think this sounds illegal or not.
Of New Jersey practically daring the agency to come to his own home. Democratic Governor Phil Murphy declared on Saturday that he and the First Lady are allowing someone pursuing legal status to stay at their home. The governor a little vague on this, but the bold admission came at an event during a broader discussion about the policies of the new Trump administration. Here is the governor. Listen.
Tammy and I were talking about, I don't want to get into too much detail, but there's someone in our broader universe whose immigration status is not yet at the point that they are trying to get it to. And we said, you know what, let's have her live at our house above our garage. And good luck to the feds coming in to try to get her.
So does that sound like it's illegal, or does it depend on if she came here illegally or not? Or like, is that a political stunt? Do you think there's even somebody living in his house? I mean, how do you process that?
Well, you notice he played around with his words, right? He didn't explicitly say it, and that's probably the reason why he didn't. Yeah, I mean, he knows it's not going to happen. No one's going to come and raid his house. But they will try to create these crises. They're going to create them, basically, make them up, where maybe at some point someone is going to do that, and then you have this constitutional crisis because it's a governor, and what's the federal government doing, and they have immunity and this and that, and it gets extremely messy very, very quickly at that point, and that's what they're trying to do. But this guy wasn't even. He didn't even have the courage to actually do that, to say it so that it can be done, because I don't even know whether he gave enough away, because he said, well, their status is not clear. That leaves so many excuses. Well, I didn't know. They didn't know. It's just, he's just grandstanding.
Yeah, just trying to score some political points. So Hans, before we wrap up, is there anything that you feel is pressing to talk about that's going on in the world that I haven't covered yet? I'm going to do some Q&A after, but did I miss anything that you think we should talk about?
I think those were the main things. I mean, I guess Ukraine is the one where we haven't heard that much yet as to
missing 100 billion.
The only new thing I heard was that President Trump wants to secure the rights on some rare earths and things that they have over there. And he quite rightly said, look, we're funding you, 200 billion, 300 billion, or whatever, we need to get something in return here. It's not just free money. I think that the thought process there is exactly correct. But yeah, I think that's a big unanswered one. And then I think the other unanswered one is China. I mean, President Trump has been playing nice with China, but then you look at his appointees, Waltz for National Security Advisor, Marco Rubio for Secretary of State, and so on. And then you kind of think, well, he's probably not really. I mean, he's making it look as if he's playing nice, but in the background, he's kind of setting up the board to do something about China, which no one has done over the past 20, 25 years during China's rise. No one has opposed him. No, and it's not about opposing, like, we don't want you to rise or whatever. It's about all the nefariousness coming out of that country. I think President Trump understands that. I think people don't give him credit for that, but I think he does. So I think one of the things going on kind of a bit in the background, isn't talked about much, is that he's kind of rearranging the board a bit. Also with these tariffs on Mexico and Canada, that was mainly about China. Like, hey, you guys, you need to stop, cooperating with China on all these things. Fentanyl is part of it, but there's many other parts of it. For instance, the Canadians were training Chinese military. Like, obviously Chinese people coming in through Mexico and many, many other things you could talk about there, cooperating with the cartels, and on and on
Right.
and on. So I think that's going on in the background. I think he's very aware of it. He's doing this very strategically, very smartly, which maybe my last point here would be that one of the most amazing things that's happened is the sort of the transition from Trump 1.0 to Trump 2.0. It's just been absolutely amazing, absolutely fantastic. I mean, he's so patient and wise and self-controlled and all those things that we didn't really necessarily associate with him in his first term, which again, I would say, he was constantly under fire, especially with this Russia thing. Having a special counsel every day, having to give up all your documents, having nonstop investigations, having every single person in your orbit, literally everyone in Trump's orbit was called in, had to lawyer up and on and on. It was just horrendous what he went through. So, that didn't break him. And then, of course, what happened in the interim 4 years with Mar-a-Lago and with all these phony cases. And I mean, it's just amazing that he came through this even stronger than he ever was. And I would say this is the best Trump there's ever been. And most of all, just, strategic and looking forward, way forward. And it's been absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's he's definitely forged in fire. He's in flow state right now, and he's crushing it. So, Hans, thank you so much for joining me. This has been great. I really appreciate your insight on all things, especially legal things, guys. If you want to know more about Hans and the book he wrote "Swift Boarding America: Deep Dive into Russia Gate," and he's a geopolitical expert, legal expert. So, Hans, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. And now we will do some Q&A, guys. All right. So any questions? I mean, we still have stuff to get into. I wanted to save the economic stuff for my side of things, but I mean, geez, you see these Canadian and Mexico tariffs, and they just folded like a cheap tent today. So if you guys didn't see that, the day starts off with, Trump announced the 25% tariffs like 2 days ago. Then Canada's like, oh, we're going to stop buying Florida orange juice. We're going to stop buying American beer. We're going to rip up our contract with Starling, blah, 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 blah. And Mexico is a little bit less bold. Mexico is like, quiet for a second, then comes out, okay, we'll send out 10,000 troops to the border. And then they go arrest a heavy cartel. And then Mexico side's kind of wrapped up. So they put a 30-day pause on that. And Canada, trying to act tough all day. Trudeau comes out, says like, oh yeah, well, maybe Canadians won't want to travel to America as much as anymore and enjoy the beautiful parts of Canada and vacation in Canada and stuff. America. I'm like, okay, Trudeau. But he folded too. And China's the only one left standing that hasn't come to the table yet. They had 10% tariffs on everything, I believe. And we haven't heard anything about that. We haven't heard. But the thing is, you have to remember China, they're in such a delicate state that I don't think they have much room to even try to act tough with. Like, they're talking about devaluing their currency to try to fight deflation. That's how bad things are getting. Like, you never want to intentionally devalue your currency, but that's literally what's on the table right now, is to devalue their currency to help buoy the deflation they're going through. Does that make sense to everybody? Anybody have any economic questions about what's going on with not China, with Canada and Mexico so far? Because I have a million articles I could go through, but I also feel like I could kind of give you the gist of it without going into articles. Denise, what is up? You made it. CYB, what is up? We were saying today, CYB, we were saying, like, what would happen if America just wanted to take Canada? Like, would they take up arms against us? Would they fight us with knives in the streets? And like, no, they would probably just complain and yell about it. But I don't think, like, I've always said that I literally don't think that that would even ever be necessary if America wanted to do that. I think that most Canadians like the way that America's run more than the way that Canada's run. So I think that if you literally just said to all the citizens in Canada, hey, if you want to be American, declare yourself an American. I think at least 51% of Canadian citizens would do that. Like, do you guys agree with that? If America said today, like, to Canada, we will accept you as an American citizen if you declare yourself an American citizen right now. What percent of Canadians would declare themselves an American citizen in that moment? I think it's over 50%. Obviously, the same things with Mexico. Yep, Zilla agrees with me. We would take Canada then. Every single war crime says every single export Canada is allowed to take a legit job out of an American person. Yeah, I know. I'm hearing stories of people complaining, saying like, "Oh, I sourced this product from Canada for my company." Like, my buddy was telling me the other day that one of his suppliers is freaking out because he sources his cardboard from Canada and you can't find a place in America that does it as cheaply because I guess they don't. It's like how things were back in the day. Like, things are cheaper in Europe because they had industrialized earlier than America. So, like, when you're further along in the cycle, you could do things more cheaply. So that's the stage that they were at. Now, like, since we've deindustrialized America and like kind of offshore that to Canada and Mexico, they're at a place where they could do it more cheaply. I mean, Mexico, because it's a freaking third world country and they pay them less, but Canada, like, I think stuff like that's because they've actually kind of built up the infrastructure to do that, and we just don't have that here. So, but that's like the key problem. Case in point, we don't have the ability to make things fast and cheaply. That's the whole problem. And plus, like you said, American jobs, like, we don't need to give that job to Canada when we could do that job in America. It's so stupid. But I mean, you see what Pierre Polyear is saying? He's getting way too ballsy the way he's talking to America. Let me pull up what he said. Pierre Polyear. Yeah, I mean, I still obviously like this guy more than Trudeau, but not a big fan. Not a big fan. Let's see. Let me show you his Twitter. Pierre Polyear. Snob. Let's see. Take back control of the border and save Canada-America trade 8 hours ago. Send Canadian forces troops. So this is the concession that they arrived at. I mean, he wasn't saying this before, so that makes this kind of funny. Send Canadian force troops, helicopters, and surveillance to the border now. Add at least 2,000 border agents. Extend CBSA powers along the entire border, not just crossings. Install high-powered scanners. But just hours before that, I'm pretty sure he was talking shit. Let's see. Are these comments?
It is based on our centuries-long history of trade, of friendship, of common defense, of fighting on the battlefield, arms locked together against common enemies. We will continue to build that friendship with the people of the United States. But let me be clear, we are an independent and we are a proud nation. And we will come through this an independent and a proud sovereign nation. We will not back down. We will not cease. We will continue to march forward as proud Canadians.
Guys, you realize how small Canada's military is? Canada's military is 65,000 people. Like, they're acting like they're just standing strong on their own because of what they're capable of. No. says we must put Canada first. This is why common sense conservatives condemn President Trump's massive, unjust, and unjustified tariffs on Canada's already weak economy. Canada is the United States' closest neighbor, greatest ally, and best friend. Best friend. We share the longest. What the hell is this guy saying? Best friend. Where we share the longest undefended border and fought alongside Americans in 2 world wars. Oh, give me a break. We barely noticed your presence. Like, when have you ever heard somebody talk about World War II, name how instrumental Canada was to winning World War I or World War II? Like, I know a good amount about history. Like, yeah, I do remember hearing Canada being involved at one point or another, but like, it's definitely not something that you bring up as a reason that anybody, like, I'm not, maybe I'm being ignorant for saying this, but would a single thing be different in World War I or World War II if Canada didn't participate? Seriously. Should I put that in the polls? I'm gonna make that poll question. First poll question of the night. Would a single thing be different in the outcome of World War I or World War II if Canada had not participated? Give me a second while I write that. Poll question. Would anything be different if Canada did not fight in World War I or World War II? All right. Question. Would a single outcome be different if Canada didn't fight in World War I or World War II? Maybe I'm the ignorant one, but that upsets me that he says that he has the audacity to brag about how we fought beside you in World War II. Shut up, dude. Like, your military is 60,000 right now. What was in the time of World War II? What was it? 10,000 people, and then you had a bunch of people join. All right, so let me continue on with his tweet here. His ridiculous tweet. So he says 2 world wars, Korea, and he's what do they do in Korea and Afghanistan? I've never heard about Canada being involved in Korea or Afghanistan. Is he talking about the Korean War, where 158 of our brave men and women died helping the U.S. avenge 9/11 attacks? There's no justification whatsoever for this treatment. All right, that's like when you're arguing with your wife or your girlfriend about one thing. Like, say, I don't know, she's like putting too much on the credit card or something, like going out for frivolous things. Then you bring it up. You're like, hey, things are a little bit unbalanced right now. You're getting a little bit out of control. And then she's like, how could you say that after like that time that I did this nice thing for you or surprised you, like when I made dinner that time, or, you know, like I was there for you when you needed like your clothing cleaned or whatever, like, you know, just bringing up anything you could grab onto in the past that you did for somebody when they call you out about something that's totally unrelated. That's what this feels like. The Liberals must put aside their partisan interests and recall Parliament now to pass a Canada First plan that will, 1, retaliate with dollar-for-dollar tariffs carefully aimed at maximizing impact on American companies while minimizing impact on Canadian consumers. That means targeting U.S. products that we can make ourselves, buy elsewhere, or do without. For example, we must retaliate against American steel and aluminum, as Canadians can make those vital products at home. 2, put all the tariff revenues into help for affected workers and businesses. Government should not keep a dime of the new revenue. 3, pass massive emergency pass a massive emergency bring it home tax cut to bolster the economy, stop inflation, and save and create jobs. Canada needs a massive tax cut on work, investment, energy, home building, and making stuff at home. The liberal carbon tax and capital gains tax hikes must be the first on the chopping block. Immediately scrap the liberal anti-resource law C-69 and greenlight LNG pipelines. Blah, 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 blah. All right. So that's what he said. Canada deal with America. So Trump and leaders say that tariffs will be delayed after talks. What caused that? I say sarcastically. Mexico's Claudia Sheinbaum and Canada's Justin Trudeau posted on social media about plans to police their borders. New tariffs on goods from China are still set to go into effect. Days after announcing a 25% tariff on imports from Canada, Canada and Mexico President Donald Trump agreed to delay them for 1 month after leaders from Canada and Mexico announced moves to ramp up at their borders, averting, at least for now, tariffs that could have driven up prices for U.S. customers and stalled the country's economies. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau wrote on social media Monday afternoon that Canada would be spending $1.3 billion on a plan to reinforce its border with new helicopters, technology, and personnel, as well as additional resources to stop the flow of fentanyl. Canada had announced its $1.3 billion border immigration investment at the end of last year. Trump soon posted as well, focusing on fentanyl and emphasizing that tariffs would be paused for a 30-day period to see whether or not a final economic deal with Canada can be structured. Earlier in the day, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum posted on social media that Mexico will immediately reinforce its northern border with 10,000 members of the country's National Guard to address drug trafficking from Mexico into the U.S., particularly fentanyl. Once again, Trump said on his own post on social media that the U.S. will continue negotiations with Mexico over border security, headed by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. The announcements came after Trump signed an executive order, blah, blah, blah. So we got that. So the 10% on Chinese imports and took steps to close loopholes allowing Chinese e-commerce companies like Temu and Shein to avoid tariffs by shipping packages worth less than $800 into U.S. duty-free. So Temu people, I've heard about this thing. Can probably say I've never bought it. Somebody told me about it before. They said, you're using Amazon, you gotta look at Temu. Temu, everything's dirt cheap. Which I'm not going to lie, it was tempting. Like, it is pretty ridiculous, but I didn't know about this loophole. Now this makes sense. Now it makes sense why Temu things were like a tenth the price of what they are in America. See, there's all these things that people don't pay attention to. So China was allowed to avoid tariffs by shipping packages that were worth less than $800 into the U.S. duty-free. Those tariffs remain on track to go into effect Tuesday. China said it will challenge the new tariffs at the World Trade Organization and take unspecified countermeasures in response. Stocks fell on Monday morning in response to the tariff announcement over the weekend, but recovered some of those losses following the agreement with Mexico. The U.S. imports more goods from Mexico than any other country. And economists and business groups had warned that tariffs could raise prices in the U.S. and trigger an economic slowdown. Yeah, there could be some of that, but I think like the end goal of the tariffs is to like have it as a source of revenue. Like, guys, you realize that we import $3.5 trillion worth of goods every year, and that we generate $80 billion of revenue from that off of tariffs. 3.5 trillion, 80 billion of revenue. If we had 100% tariff on all of those goods, that'd be 3.5 trillion. Our federal budget is 5 trillion. What we paying taxes to, make the government run. So Elon says that he could cut 30% of government spending. I think he said in the next year or the next 2 years. And tariffs at 100% would generate 3.5 trillion. Now you probably don't want 100% tariffs. I don't know if that's good for anybody, but that sounds like something that could eliminate federal income taxes. Now, prices are more expensive, but there's no federal income taxes. Then that might be a net positive especially for if you're going to spend money on things and you get a sales tax, or if you, I don't know, you got property taxes, et cetera, et cetera. But to take taxes right off the top before you even receive your money that you're getting paid, I think that's like the lowest form of this thing. Let's see, we have any good questions yet? What we got in here? Yeah, I agree with the 80% number. It's that lady that we had the other day said that, what is it, 20 or like 20% of the government does 100% of the work, or 80% of the work. Yeah, 20% does 80% of the work. Build our government fund. So yeah, Trump's actually talking about building a sovereign wealth fund. Jeez. Sorry about all the coughing and sneezing. I don't know what's going on. Here we go. Trump signs order to create U.S. sovereign wealth fund. From the Wall Street Journal. President Trump on Monday signed an executive order to create a U.S. sovereign wealth fund and suggested that the fund could be used in unlocking a deal to keep TikTok operating. I think in a short period of time, we have one of the biggest funds. And some of them are pretty large, Trump said, referring to Saudi Arabia's public investment fund. I think it's about time that this country had a sovereign wealth fund. Trump didn't explain what role the fund would play in a potential purchase of TikTok. He says, TikTok, we're going to be doing something, perhaps TikTok and perhaps not. If we make it the right deal, we'll do it, Trump said. But I have the right to do that. And we might put that in the sovereign wealth fund. So that's like in an endowment for a college, or like how mutual funds work or whatever, or even say a life insurance company. Correct me if I'm mistaken, but I believe the money that gets paid to them gets put in a fund that grows money. So and that's the pool of money that they pull from when they have to pay somebody. So the government, why doesn't the government have a pool of money that's growing and investing? Not a bad idea. I mean, it's a better idea than just giving money out to people as fast as you can, which it sounds like is what we've been doing. The White House said this order instructs the Treasury Department and the Commerce Department to begin a process to examine the creation of a sovereign wealth fund. I mean, it's good that the head of the Commerce Department is a hedge fund guy. The president was joined in the Oval Office with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, that's the guy, Oracle's Larry Ellison, and billionaire media mogul Rupert Murdoch. Oh, wow, Rupert Murdoch in there in the house. Murdoch and his family are significant shareholders in Wall Street Journal parent company News Corp. We're going to stand this thing up in the next 12 months, said Bessent. We're going to monetize the asset side of the U.S. balance sheet for the American people. Bessent said that they plan to study the best practices of other funds, and it would hold a combination of liquid assets and other U.S. assets. I think this is a good idea. Let's see how much money Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund has. Throw a guess in the chat before I pull this up. How big, or let's see, biggest sovereign wealth funds. Wow. Oh yeah, I heard Norway's is huge. So I hear legendary things about Norway's, and this is the biggest one, if I'm counting this number the right way. I think this is $1 trillion. Yep, this is correct. Okay, so check this out. Check this out. Norway's sovereign wealth fund, because of the way that they monetize their oil, is $1.7 trillion. So this is a good case study for this. Look at this. Norway Government Pension Fund Global, 1.7. And by the way, a sovereign wealth fund is the right way to do freaking something like Social Security. Okay? Like they dumbass FDR set up Social Security in a way where it's like you take from people and then you give to people. You take from people, you give to people. You take, you give, you take, you give. This, like this thing, if you put somebody who could grow money in charge of it, and they have U.S. assets to work with, and you could use policies to, like, you would have to have strict oversight to make sure that people like don't get corrupt with it, but you could grow the hell out of this thing if you wanted to, and this could be the retirement fund for people. Whatever the, I don't know, determined number is that you need to live in your retirement years, you could have this thing spit it out for people. But that's the way to do it. So 1.7 trillion, 1.3 trillion for China's investment corporation, which I like. This Norway one I trust because they actually have like a ridiculous amount of oil, and that's how they're able to do this thing. China, I don't think I trust that one too much. Safe investment company from Asia. You have to call yourself safe. I don't know if you're too safe. Abu Dhabi Investment Authority. Yep, that sounds rich. Kuwait Investment Authority. Yep, sounds rich. Public Investment Fund Middle East. Probably. Qatar. Yep, there you go. So a lot of Asia, Middle East, very few Europe. So let's take a little bit of a deeper look at this thing. So what can we know about this? I want to know how this thing works. Let's see. Norway Sovereign Wealth Fund. Let's chat GPT it. Let's put it in the chat bot. All right, here we go. Explain the Norway Government Pension Fund Global. Why is it the biggest? How does it grow? How is it allocated? All right, now share screen. All right. Norway Government Pension Fund Global Overview and Growth Strategy. What is the Norway Government Pension Fund Global? Norway Government Pension Fund Global, established in 1990. Established in 1990 now, already has 1.7 trillion in it. Why is it the biggest? Wealth and smart management. Oil wealth and smart management. Norway's vast oil and gas reserves, particularly from the North Sea, provide a massive revenue stream. Instead of spending all profits, the government saves a large portion through GPFG. Yep, prudent investment strategy, strict spending rules. Government is only allowed to use a small portion, typically around 3% of the fund's value annually, to support the national budget. It prevents overspending and preserves long-term growth. Wow, why do they have their shit together so much? Compound growth, obviously. How does it grow? Oil revenue, global investments, currency market gains, dividends. How's it allocated? GPFG investment strategy is heavily weighted towards global equities, ensuring high long-term returns. The general allocation is 70% investment over 9,000 companies worldwide, including giants like Apple, Microsoft. Oh, so they literally just invested like a mutual fund. But what do they do with the money? Is it given to people upon retirement? Oh, so no, it's not given to people when they retire. Norway's government pension fund is not a personal retirement fund like a 401k or a pension plan for individual citizens. Instead, it serves as a national wealth fund that supports Norway's economy and future generations through government spending. Interesting. So they have like a really big safety net, but they're only allowed to spend 3% of it. Interesting. So this is a real stabilizing force in the economy. One thing I can guarantee you is that we would not have the discipline to spend 3%. I mean, see, like this is the real world. This is how countries have to operate when you don't have the ability to print as much money as you want to, which we do, which we've abused the hell out of. How much gold is in Fort Knox? Nah. Well, I would imagine that the United States still has the most gold because we act that way. But let's look it up, and then I'll say I don't think the most gold's held at Fort Knox because that'd be stupid. I think that it's like Area 51. It's like the famous alien place. Everybody assumes aliens are there. Probably not the craziest stuff there. Then Fort Knox is the gold place. Everybody assumes all the gold's there. So you're gonna have a little bit of gold there and hold the actual big amounts of other places. Like I think there's a good amount under the New York Fed. I heard gold. Let's see which countries have the most gold. Gold is going crazy right now, by the way. It's almost at 3,000 an ounce. I think it's like 2,800 an ounce, which is very strange because the dollar's been ripping higher lately because of the tariffs. And normally when the dollar goes higher, it pushes everything else down, especially gold. So very, very strange. I mean, it's a real powerful indicator for gold if it's able to go up in spite of the dollar going up as well. Let's see. I love how the simplest question could spark a whole rabbit hole. I really do enjoy that. No cap. All right, so yeah, America by a lot. This isn't the best chart, but it's America by a lot. Let's see if we can find a better chart. Huh? All right, here we go. From 2019, America by far the most gold. I'm pretty sure it's still the same. Germany number 2, Italy number 3, France 4, Russia 5, China 6. This is interesting because you always hear about China stockpiling gold. So the next question would be, which facilities in the U.S. carry the most gold? Which U.S. facilities hold the most gold reserves. You know, there are two things that we have to talk about someday that are very interesting, but definitely not something I'm trying to explain in 5 or 10 minutes because it's disrespectful to the topic. Is what happened with FDR's bullshit that he pulled, where he freaking made it illegal to buy and own gold in the United States, and he literally confiscated gold for a set price in, I think, 1935. You believe that? Imagine if that happened today. They say it's illegal to own gold. If you own gold, we're going to come to you. We're going to give you X amount of money for it, which we determine. And if you say no, you're arrested. That's what FDR did, the so-called greatest president ever. Bullshit. FDR is not like, not only is he not close to the greatest president ever, I put him in like the top 5-ish worst presidents ever. Maybe even top 3. This is funny. They say Fort Knox holds the most gold. Do they now? Do they now? I don't think so. You know what? That's a good poll question. All right. So, damn, guys, only 54% of you voted, or only 54 votes in this Canada thing. All right. I'm going to say now, does Fort Knox actually hold the most gold in the United States? Sunrise MMA, thank you so much. Well, Sunrise MMA, let me pull up your super chat. Sunrise MMA says, will Mexican cartels retaliate against U.S. tourists, or will they shift focus to controlling legitimate industries like petroleum or avocado trade? All right, that's a great question. Let me put a bow in this gold thing, and then I will be all over that. All right, so which facilities hold the most gold in the U.S.? I think it's in Trental's Fort Knox. Let's see. So this is the Treasury report that details U.S. gold reserve supply in government vaults. Fort Knox, Kentucky continues to be the primary storage for gold reserves, followed by the West Point Mint, north of U.S. Military Academy in New York. According to the Treasury Bureau's Financial Services, as of November 30th, 2024, Fort Knox vault held, what is that? Is 147 million troy ounces of gold coins. Nice. The gold in deep storage is held as an asset of the United States at a book value of $42 per troy ounce. Huh? I thought gold is like 2,800 an ounce. What are you talking about? The book value has been a constant of, okay. That's very strange. What the hell are they talking about? Price of an ounce of gold. Am I losing my mind here? No, I'm not losing my mind. The price of an ounce of gold is 2,800. So what does it mean? Book value of $42 an ounce. All right, I'm gonna ask ChatGPT this. I mean, sorry guys if you don't find this interesting, but I think we might have just discovered something very strange here. Does the government calculates ounces of gold at different prices than the market. Yes, the U.S. government values its gold reserves at a fixed book value of $42 per troy ounce, which has remained unchanged since 1973. This is much lower than the actual price of gold, which fluctuates based on supply and demand. What? Why is it do? That's bizarre. Did you guys know that? Why does the U.S. use a different gold price? All right, I'm going to show you this because I think it'd be unfair not to. Wow, great question to spark this rabbit hole. I think it was Brian. Yeah, Brian, good call. What a rabbit. My God. Did you guys know this? Say in the chat because this is insane. So we're on the right thing right now. Okay, yep. So why does the US use a different price? Because like I said, the price of gold right now is $2,800 an ounce. So the U.S. government maintains a fixed book value for gold holdings to keep a balance sheet stable rather than constantly adjusting for market fluctuations. So when they say the number of what the value of gold is that we have, like in Fort Knox or something, they're counting it at $42 an ounce, or are they counting at the real value? Historical standard, the Fort 22 price dates back to when the U.S. officially left the gold standard 71 and revalued gold from 35 to 42. By the way, the government just saying this is the price of gold. Stupidest thing ever. Stupidest thing ever. Like when they've tried to fix a price of a physical object, you know that you're getting schemed. You know that they're trying to scheme you. Because the whole point of gold is to keep up with inflation. The price of it's what somebody's willing to pay for it. Political and financial reasons. If the U.S. were to revalue gold at market prices currently over $2,000 per ounce, it could have major implications on financial statements, monetary policy, and global confidence in it. Holy shit. What? What does this mean? The official U.S. gold value is outdated and does not reflect market reality. How did I not know about this? Did you guys know about this? That the gold that the government holds is counted at $42 an ounce? This is insane. Because think about it. It's at 2,800 an ounce right now. That's extremely low. Like everybody says gold should be at least 10,000 an ounce with the amount of money that we printed. So the real market value numbers lower than it should be. That's at 2,800. Then another layer deeper, the government's gold that it holds, it values it at 42 an ounce because they say letting it go to 2,800 an ounce would throw things off. So like think about how unstable things are where we have to have layers and layers and layers of deception and fixed numbers and control over this. Like that's how crazy the system is. It's how out of control things are. All right. So if gold is revalued at market price, if gold was revalued to market prices, the U.S. Treasury's gold reserves would be worth over 40 times more than what is recorded. This accounting method is largely symbolic and does not impact daily market trading or the Federal Reserve's monetary policy. So I'm sure we're all wondering the same question right now, which I'm going to type in immediately, is what is the value on the books of the amount of gold that the U.S. government owns versus times 45? What is the current value of the U.S. Treasury Freeze gold on the books. All right, so what is this number? Is this 261 billion? 261 million? Oh, wait, no, this is the number. It's important to note that the book value is based on the statutory price at 1973 and does not reflect the current market value of gold. For instance, on September 30th, 2020, the market value of gold reserves was estimated at 493 billion, significantly higher than the book value. So is this 11 billion? What is the what is the market value of the U.S. Treasury's gold at 2,800 an ounce? This is like I've went down a lot of rabbit holes about gold stuff before. I've never found this. Okay, the U.S. Treasury's gold reserves would be worth at a market price of 2,800 per troy ounce. The U.S. Treasury's gold reserves would be worth approximately 732 billion. What is it worth at? What's the number? 42.222. What a weird number to pick. Bet you it's totally random. What is it worth at 42.2222? All right, so now for the test, because this is a big difference. Like, what does it say when you ask Google what's the value of the U.S. government's gold? Does it say 11 billion? Does it say 732 billion? Let's see. What is the value of the U.S. government's It doesn't even say, but it says the $42 an ounce thing. Bizarre. I feel like this is like a Mandela effect thing. Holy shit. Well, did not. Well, actually, here we could still answer that question. We could still answer that question, Brian. So at Fort Knox, 147. Okay. Next. Yeah. The rest are Denver Mint, West Point Mint, 56, then some Federal Reserve banks. But on paper, the Fort Knox, 147. Very strange, very strange, very strange. I'm sure there's a lot more to talk about there. We'll do that another time. But next, let's get into Sunrise MMA's question finally. Will Mexican cartels retaliate against U.S. tourists, or will they shift focus to controlling legitimate industries like petroleum and avocado trade? I would say that they would do a bit of both. I mean, I'll never forget, even when I went on spring break, the one time I went on spring break, I was worried about that type of stuff. Everybody said, "Oh, don't be dramatic. They don't do that to tourists. They just, they want people to come to their country. They want people, Americans, to come there and spend money." So I go there and I hear this story like a couple weeks later that this so when you get there at the airport, they have these vans that bring you to the hotel, and like it's the whole resort area and stuff. I hear the story of this kid that like wasn't from my town, wasn't from my school. Like it was a friend of a friend of a friend situation where the van that he was going to get in with his friends was like too full, so he had to wait and get another van. The van that he got into, I guess, ended up abducting him, and he was pretty much held ransom by the cartel. And they like were like showing video of him like extorting his family, having them send money, and they send money. They stop hearing from him. He's found on the railroad tracks like weeks later, whacked. So I would imagine that they're still going to mess with U.S. terrorists. Yes, I would say that's a safe bet. I'd say they're going to do everything possible to make this inconvenient for the U.S. government. But the reassuring thing is they haven't dealt with a vicious president like this who, will smack them 10 times harder if they do things like this. And but at the same time, I think that they are more likely to get in the avocado trade. Like they already are in the avocado trade from what I hear, than the petroleum and natural gas trade, because that's like a highly complex thing. The only way that you're going to get involved in that is if you're straight up extorting people, and those things are so important that you'll start having like private security contractors getting hired by the government to protect these companies that produce oil and gas, petroleum. So I think it's highly unlikely that the cartel messes with those, but avocados possible, probably already happening. So yes. Yeah, the elites buying up gold. The Federal Reserve Bank's been buying gold at a high pace for years now. I mean, we're so freaking due for a crash. Like, it's unbelievable. And then, like, now that they have a president that they don't want in, that they can blame it on, I think that a crash is super likely. I was mind blown that they avoided a crash during Biden. But like I said, BlackRock owns freaking 10% of every company. And then, Vanguard owns like 5 to 7% of every company. And State Street owns like 3 to 5% of every company. So my opinion is that, like, whenever scary things happened under Biden that would normally cause a stock market crash, BlackRock entities like that, I think they swooped in and slammed on the brakes, kind of buoyed the market. And like, think about it, how easy it is, guys. They used to have a steady stream, like pump, pump, pump. They don't even have to throw it in each stock. Like, the index funds make it so easy. Like the S&P, like the SPY index fund, you're putting money in the S&P just by putting into that one fund. So like, how difficult is it just like pump money into that each day? Like, they see exactly what the outflows are. They in large part control what CNBC says. Like, it's very easy to guide the stock market in a certain direction. That's why when the Federal Reserve comes out, does their monthly statement or whatever about interest rates, it's called forward guidance, because they're guiding the market like a bunch of helpless sheep in one direction, because the market's kind of retarded. Like, the degree to which the Federal Reserve impacts the stock market is repulsive. I remember in 2021 when it was, I was going to say when the stock market was out of control, but it's like 20% higher now than it was back then. Like, rates were at zero and people were saying like, oh, they might start hiking rates. And like, that was the only argument. Like, the argument wasn't for the fundamentals. It wasn't for revenue. It wasn't for debt for the companies. It wasn't for the technology the companies were making. It was for whether or not the Federal Reserve was going to start hiking rates and start cutting quantitative easing. Speaking of that, by the way, saw a very weird thing. I saw, like how I've been talking about Trump's brewing battle with the Federal Reserve. So I saw an article that said Trump where is this thing? That he's backpedaling on basically asking the Fed to lower rates. That he's now content with them keeping rates where they are. Where's this thing? Where's this thing? Here we are. Look at this. Explain this one. I mean, maybe it's because he knows there'd be a little inflation bump from the tariffs at first. But I thought he was gearing up for war with this one. From CNBC, in a switch, Trump approves the Fed's decision to hold interest rates steady. So why would he be doing this? 1 second. Let me get this. All right. So President Donald Trump agreed with the Federal Reserve for its decision last week to leave interest rates unchanged, an early pivot from his previous demand that the central banks ease immediately. In exchange with reporters Sunday, Trump said holding its key borrowing level in a range between 4.25 to 4.5 was the correct move for the Fed. He said, quote, "I'm not surprised." He said, regarding the decision, according to multiple reports, holding the rates at this point was the right thing to do. The statement stood in a stark contrast to one Trump delivered when speaking remotely to the World Economic Forum in Davos in Switzerland in a Jan 23 appearance. Trump said he would demand that interest rates drop immediately. You know, what he really has to worry about is what credit card interest rates are like. Oh, it's at like what, 20-30%? Like, that's freaking loan sharking. Get that shit out of here. Now it's at like over $1 trillion of credit card debt for the nation. What the fuck? The president has no direct authority over the Fed because it's a private company that hijacked the nation over 100 years ago, which we'll get to another time. Though he does nominate the chairman as well as the other board members. Current chair Jerome Powell is a Trump nominee and a frequent target of the president's criticism. Markets don't expect the Fed to lower rates until at least June. In post-meeting news conference last week, Powell repeatedly asserted that the Fed doesn't need to be in a hurry to lower it farther after shaving a full percentage point off the Fed funds rate from September to December in 2024. The Fed's decision-making got potentially more complicated after Trump on Saturday said he would impose aggressive tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China. The three largest U.S. trading partners. Economists worry that the tariffs would drive up prices at a time when inflation is slow and showing signs of easing. So yeah, the way I read this is that Trump acknowledges that like tariffs could have a little inflation bump. So, you know, maybe you don't want the two currents going in the same direction of lowering rates and imposing tariffs. So that'd be double inflationary. See, the thing is, with inflation, people only look at it from one side. Like tariffs, the goal of tariffs is to eventually have higher paying jobs here. So higher paying jobs should offset inflation. Let's look quick at U.S. trade deficits with Canada. U.S. trade with Canada. So let's see. Overall goods balance. How do we read this chart? Oh, it only goes to 2014 anyways. It's not very useful. How about this one? Is this? I don't know. Oh. Dominance of manufactured goods in the U.S. Okay, here we go. Now we're on to something. Leave it to visual capitalists to give us the right freaking chart. So dominance of manufactured goods in the U.S. trade deficit. So look at that. We don't make anything here anymore. And, yeah, manufacturing deficit in 2022. China, 470 billion. Mexico, 155 billion. Vietnam, 123. Japan, 103. Germany, 83. They don't have Canada on there. Interesting. Interesting. Dominance of manufactured goods in the U.S. trade deficit. 2001 to 2018 from 2020, China accounted for more than 40% of the growth in imports, 59% of the increase in the U.S. manufacturing deficit. Jesus. Yep, 2001, China joins the WTO. And the U.S. trade deficit was 84 billion with China. Jesus. Oof, this was real bad when the U.S. had to import a shit ton of its oil before fracking was discovered. And oil prices started to fall by 2015 because of fracking. Yeah, I'd be lying if I said I really knew how to explain this chart. Well, guys, we're at, let's see, we're almost at 2 hours strong now. But hey, I missed you. Like I said it yesterday. I made the admission. I told you I was gonna live stream every single day. I missed Saturday because my family, they did an incredible thing. They let me believe that a few of them were visiting here for my birthday, and I go to the place to meet them. Had a feeling it was a surprise thing, like a surprise situation. But even with me knowing that it was a surprise situation, expecting something, I was blown away, like super surprised. Like so many of them showed up. It was insane. And we rented a place where we all hung out for the weekend. So it was so sick. And I'll break the streak for being able to maximize time with them. Like, I'm sorry. So that's why I didn't stream on Saturday. Had a great time. Unbelievable. Super happy and thankful for it. And but yeah, it was my birthday. So whatever. Give me a pass. But we're still going strong going forward. It is what it is. I mean, geez, so much to freaking talk about. You need Venn diagrams. You're funny. Steve P, you're the man. Thank you. Did you guys like the guy who was on before, by the way? Thank you, Heather. You're the best. Texas woman. Hey, Texas woman. I haven't seen you in a while. How are you doing? I saw Miss D jumping before. Miss D, how's it going? I saw she said it's Tuesday in Australia area. That's wild. Yeah. Guys, put in the chat. Who do you miss most that I was having on between? Oh, you want to drive the guys crazy quick? I'll put in the poll. Who was your favorite guest out of my friends? Humberto, Tony, or Cam? Oh, geez. Gonna make these dudes super self-conscious. Who's your favorite guest? Favorite guest. Humberto, Cam, Tony. All right, real quick. Favorite guest, if you guys have seen him. Yeah, Tony's off to the early lead. Oh, okay. Vote now. Let's see. Moment of truth. This is interesting. I can't wait to tell these guys. Damn. 0 votes for Cam? Yikes. Damn, he's getting smacked right now. Damn, I almost feel bad to tell him. Maybe it's unfair, though. Amy, you guys are funny. Do you guys want Amy on? I was telling the guys before. If you guys want Amy on, I'll get Amy on. I know she's a fan favorite, especially if some people like literally directly reached out to me. I keep messing this thing up. Trying to pin my Minnect thing and it's mean all. So hit me up on Minnect if you guys want to ask any direct questions. I know some of you have me and Steve. Steve said, what's good time for tomorrow? Tomorrow. Let me check. Tomorrow. Let me check my calendar. Let me check my calendar. Tomorrow looks pretty good. I'd say 3 o'clock tomorrow. 4 o'clock tomorrow. Yeah, anytime after 3, between 3 and 7. Yeah, between 3 o'clock and 7 o'clock p.m. tomorrow Eastern time. Let's say that. Let's do that. Let's see how this poll is looking like. Oh, guys, I cannot tell Cam about this poll. What's so bad about Cam? I thought Cam was going to be the favorite. Damn. Text woman says, I missed locker room talk. I like this chat. I know. We can't lose that. My buddies have been a little bit busy, but yeah, I know. That was my favorite part. Like, I'd rather like talk about this shit in like a shit talking way more than like a dead serious way. You know, you want to make it fun. So I'm right there with you, Texas woman. Heather says, you have to do one without Humberto. I really think he would be if you took Humberto out. I've done a few without Humberto. Texas woman says, my husband's a chauvinist and I love it. Love that. Love it. Let's see what else we got. You want me to have Connor on? So I'd love to have Connor on. I remember in the past I invited him on a few times and he seemed to like kind of simmer down at night a bit. But Yeah, I would definitely have Connor on. He's one of the smartest dudes here. Oh, Nuffy, stop it. Stop it. See, I cannot bring Amy in here if I actually no, I was gonna say I can't bring Amy in here if you guys are gonna talk like this, but actually it'd be much funnier if you guys are just ridiculous. I think she'd get a kick out of that. What was the yes to, Laura? Sorry. Let's see. You have to do one without Humberto. So you're saying do a Cam episode without Humberto. I've done a few of those. But we'll have Cam on tomorrow. So get this. So Cam was one of the people who showed up for my birthday. If you guys don't know, Cam's one of my like lifelong best friends. Lives in, I guess I could say it. It's a big state. Lives in North Carolina right now. Drove to Florida to be like with my family to surprise me for my birthday. And then he drove back to North Carolina last night for work. So he's a day one guy. Text him, what do you mean your husband's a chauvinist and you love it? That's right, Alan. We love Colombian Cam. Cracks me up. Oh man. I always show Amy these like screenshots of these funny comments. Yep, that's right, Zilla. Oh, text woman, thank you so much. Did you watch all of them or just the first one? So there's 5 of them right now, and I'm working on the 6th one. Yep, and I've said that way too much. But I'm being like a little OCD about this one because it's the first one that really is like applicable to today because it's about the Federal Reserve and the Rothschilds. Oh, I'll get to Soros. Don't worry. There's going to be 8 to 10 parts of this Rothschild series. But yeah, no, I'll do one on Soros. Okay, stay in your own zip code when it pops. Heavy metals will be exchanged. Okay. Have I want Melania Trump on? Okay. Penny Paka said, Amy's cool. Kelly would sue us. Ah! Is this somebody that works at VT? Who is this? I'm going to show this to Kelly. I've actually asked Kelly before because you know why I think Kelly could be good is because I need to have people on here that I disagree with and that I could argue with because I think it's sometimes a little boring if I just like agree with somebody the whole time. So Kelly, I could fight with, and that'd be an element of entertaining on its own. I could fight with Amy too. You guys might get too turned on. Oh, jeez. Vinny, but only if he pops those veins on his head. Yeah, I have Vinny on every once in a while when something big happens, but he's busy right now. What do you guys mean have Melania on? Like I could just hit up Melania and have her on. Like she rarely goes on anything. Do a poll without Humberto. That's what you're saying. But now there's a built-in bias. Who's better? Oh, I actually have a better one. Who should the next guest be? Amy, PVD. All right, answer this one. This should be interesting. Not from an objective standpoint, but just from you guys being thirsty bastards in here. All right, I got your Texas woman. It's all good. LMG. Yeah, Cam's the one who went on the road trip with me. I got my cousin Antonio on here. I saw him this weekend again unexpectedly, and savage military guy. He has some really cool stories. Yep, that's right. Cam is a soldier and a real brother. I met Cam in middle school, believe it or not, in 8th grade. We were on the wrestling team together. Then we went to the same private high school, played football together. And then I went to college. He goes to the military. And like right at the time I decided to stop like working corporate stuff and to go into like YouTube and media and all that. Gets out of the military, and then we kind of reconvene and get an apartment together in Texas for a year. Then when that like expired, I went back to Connecticut for a few months, sold solar panels, and even though I enjoy the competitive aspect of sales and the like amount of money you can make in it, it's like just walking around feeling like I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do. And it's freaking 30 degrees out in Connecticut. I'm walking around neighborhoods with like snow on the ground, trying to tell people why it's a great idea to buy solar panels. So it was felt silly. And then I said, you know what? I love this dude PBD. So I'm going to do anything possible to get the attention of somebody at Valuetainment and show them that, I could make things happen, that I should be part of their network. And that finally happened. Let's see what this poll's looking like. All right, good. Good. You guys are crazy. I'll ask PBD to come on sometime. So I have one younger brother and like a ton of cousins, but that's a good idea. I almost did that the other day when I was at the place we're staying out with everybody, but there's music going, people are drinking and stuff, and just trying to like enjoy the moment. But I know my grandma would be a hilarious guest. Like she's the funniest person without trying to be funny at all. It's ridiculous. So I have considered thinking about having her on as a guest, but I would need to send like one of my cousins to her house to help her get on the computer, figure out how to join this chat if we had any hopes of that. But she would be hilarious on here. So that's possible. And then I'll have more family people on. I have some like ridiculous uncles that like say crazy shit that would be funny. I don't know. It's all an experiment. I'm trying to make it fun, but also like make sure that you get some degree of value and information out of that you wouldn't have gotten anywhere else. It has to be fun, has to be informative, right? That's what we go for. But we're at 2 hours now, so let me try to establish a normal routine this week and go to bed at a normal time, work out and all that. But I love you guys. I'm glad to be back. See, I'm like dragging this thing out because I missed you so much. But until tomorrow night, goodbye, goodbye. God bless. Love you. Connect with me on Minnect if you want to talk one-on-one. I put the link somewhere in the chat. It's also in the description. And God bless. I'll see you tomorrow night.
You know, we talk about the deep state, we talk about the globalists, inflation versus deflation.
Well, I mean,
Here at Mar-a-Lago. I'm baffled that this isn't front page news.
Do you guys support a specific political party, or do you dislike both of them?
Oh, it worked like a charm on you guys.
Let's go, Brandon.